Through the My Toyota store, you can enjoy hassle-free online buying for your Toyota genuine parts and all make parts. With an electronic parts catalog containing over 400,000 Toyota genuine parts, all accessible through a model serial search so you can take the guesswork out of identifying the correct part for your equipment. Get started today at shop.toyotaforklift.com. That's shop.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Justin Newell. He is the CEO at Inform, and Inform is focused on optimizing your business through software. And we're going to dive a little bit further into that today. We're going to talk a lot about increased capacity demands and how they're impacting warehouse flows. And we're going to talk about their workforce utilization solution that's helping you optimize your workforce even more, your existing workforce with some of those labor challenges out there. So we're going to dive into that with Justin today. And Justin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Definitely happy to have you on. Happy to talk about this. I think there's a lot of conversation around doing more with less these days. That seems to be a big time theme in supply chain, especially in operations overall. So very excited to dig into this and talk to you a little bit about how Inform is helping with this. But before we get started, for people that maybe are not familiar, why don't you give us a brief overview of Inform and what you guys do?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Inform is a company that's been around for about 55 years. We're an AI-based solutions company founded in Germany. We actually were founded out of the university, and we started in operations research. And again, we're based in Aachen, which is kind of an AI engineering hotspot in Germany. I was in the automotive space when I was younger in my career, and kind of Stuttgart's more of the automotive mecca. Aachen is more of what we would call kind of the technology mecca. And so we're a company that provides process AI, automation, optimization, business agility, and we're even starting to incorporate, obviously, a lot of things that people are talking about today, like generative AI, chatbots, co-pilots, large language models. And distinctively, Inform is involved in a large number of industries, but very specific industries. So we're involved in industries like logistics, demand and supply chain planning, inventory optimization, aviation and ground handling. We're big in the aviation world, so really looking at above and below wing services. We do workforce management, which is part of what we'll talk about today a little bit. And obviously we're in inbound, outbound, truck and time slot management, scheduling, intelligent yard management, intralogistics, supply chain, line side management within manufacturing facilities, production planning, and then some other areas. And then vehicle logistics is another space that we kind of play independently in, which really touches the entire vehicle supply chain from factory to dealer to compound, doing some strategic network planning in that space, route optimization and things of that nature. And then we also get into container terminal management, returnable containers. And one thing that's interesting that I looked up, we touch about 14 million transactions per day from various different customer systems in the supply chain world alone. So that's a pretty big area. And then one last thing that's not really as interesting from the logistics side, but interesting for Inform, we also play in the fraud and risk space and fraud prevention. So we're also looking at anti-money laundering, sanction screening, which is kind of important with the current war that's going on, wire transaction monitoring, and people trying to constantly stay ahead of the fraud scheme. So we also play in that world too.
Interesting. And obviously covering a breadth of things there for sure. And I see all the aviation behind you there too. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, a little combination of automotive and aviation put together, my favorites, which is an old Delta cargo plane with a Porsche 356 gate loaded onto it.
Nice. Some nice cargo there for sure.
Yeah. I spent about 15 years of my career with Porsche. I was originally in the after sales side. I spent some time helping manage some of their distribution facility related activities when I first joined them, and then kind of transitioned into procurement, which I'm surprised I made it through that process because that's a challenging role to play in the procurement world. And then finished my career with Porsche on the vehicle logistics, quality, supply chain activities. That's really managing North American vehicle logistics for Porsche. So really everything from vehicles going onto the ocean and getting to the dealer.
Very nice. Very cool. Very cool. And so I'm curious too. I mean, you guys have been around for quite some time, and Form has, and you mentioned that you've been focused on AI for a long time. So, and I think in the general topic of discussion around AI, it's just in the last 2 years now, it's really come to the surface for just the everyday person talking about. So I'm curious how that kind of conversation has evolved over the years and how the demand and awareness around that has evolved too.
Yeah, that's a good question. I recently attended an Alabama Automotive Manufacturers Association. And as you can imagine, when you're talking about warehousing or production manufacturing, there's a lot of conversation around what level of people have adopted automation. And that's quite high. I mean, in a lot of areas with different technologies, robotics and things of that nature. But then when you talk about artificial intelligence, there's kind of 3 phases. And there was a professor from the University of Auburn, and he mentioned that roughly when it comes to artificial intelligence, I think the statistic were somewhere in the 70 to 80% people have heard the term artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, fuzzy logic, whatever it might be. There's more companies that have adopted the strategy. It's more in the 30% of companies that really have some form of artificial intelligence strategy built into, we must do this in the coming years, and the adoption's below 20%. So there's even less companies that have actually incorporated artificial intelligence, and it could be generative AI, it could be co-pilots, it could be different things. But what we really focus on is process AI. So operation-based, helping workers, giving them guidance in digital decision-making to help them do their job on a daily basis, and really helping the operation be very, very strategic. And you always have disruptions in, it could be, airport operations. It could be in a massive warehouse environment. People call out, people leave early. There's delays in activities. And if you don't have something that can help kind of perform process maneuvering of that staff and scheduling in real time, you're ultimately going to lose a lot of, efficiencies that you have in your staff. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, artificial intelligence is a huge factor right now. People love to use it as a buzzword. A lot of people love to say that it's incorporated in their solutions.
Yeah.
And artificial intelligence journey started around 1985. So we've really been doing artificial intelligence for probably the last 20 plus years. Wow. And been pretty strong in that world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting too to see that evolution, because you mentioned that, some companies are trying to position themselves with AI now too, and, throwing on like .ai to their name and things like that. I think it's pretty interesting to see just how much attention that's capturing, not just in our industry, in our marketplace, but just in the world in general overall. So very interesting there. So, let's talk a little bit about from the warehouse operations side of things, as we look at things, and obviously, there's been a higher push, higher demand on warehousing and operations, especially with e-commerce continuing to grow with a huge growth spike during the pandemic, and now, steadily continuing to grow, even though it's not growing at the same rapid rate during that period. But as those kind of increased capacity demands come out, and we're looking to get more out of our operations, consumers are looking for more faster delivery. They're looking for more visibility, transparency. How do those start to kind of weigh on and impact the overall warehouse operational flows that are happening?
We'll be back after a quick break.
When it comes to systems, you want something that will start showing results fast. You're looking for a tool that can enable your 3PL or warehouse to get to the next level. So why wait? That's why Carton Cloud provides supported, fast onboarding that can have your WMS up and running in hours, not months. Jump into Carton Cloud's easy-to-use workflows for all of your services, including cross-docking, serialized inventory tracking, e-commerce order fulfillment, and more. This software is built by logistics people for logistics people And those logistics people are standing by to help train you and support you so that you can be successful with your customer. With 24/7 real-time reporting and free online training, you need to check out Carton Cloud for your operation. Take the next step in your operation by heading to cartoncloud.com/free-demo or click the link in the show notes.
Yeah, I think, one thing that's important is labor shortages. I mean, that comes up in a lot of areas. Obviously, what I would call skilled and non-skilled labor, that seems to be really the core of where the shortages are. We know we have driver shortages, and I worked for a transportation company before coming to Inform, and that was real. It didn't matter what you were transporting, there was a driver shortage. So if you were transporting cars, if you were transporting food, fruit, whatever it is, there's a shortage. And I think with the retiring population of the baby boomers, and there's less people in the workforce that are able to work these days, that's causing issues. And, we were actually with an OEM last week, and we were talking about the impacts because you had COVID, you had supply chain disruptions, you had chip shortages, you had all these different factors. And I think a lot of people didn't realize that the maritime community, it took them a long time to get their vessels back on track. It took them a long time to get the container movements back into the right sequence, where they actually had empty containers where they needed them, where the full containers were where they needed to be. And so that right sizing of the entire industry, that didn't just happen in 2 months. It didn't happen in 1 year. It's still happening. It's still really working its way out. And one example that they had was, in a warehouse perspective, if you've got labor shortage issues, for example, on the West Coast, they're getting massive backloads of containers right now. So what's happening is they can't put stuff away fast enough, so they can't do stock put away operations fast enough. They can't pick and pull fast enough. They can't do inventory fast enough. All these critical things that happen in a distribution center. And so what's happening is now they've got offsite locations where they're storing trailers. Now you've got situations where they have no visibility of what's offsite. They've got no prioritization going on of, hey, this trailer really would have been better to pull that one first because it's got backordered material that we could suffice orders with that could shut down a line somewhere. And so there's all of these different things that are going on. And what they basically said was, it's a mess. It's a real mess. They don't have any way to solve that problem. So that's where intelligent yard systems, that's where visibility, that's where workforce management, looking at staff and scheduling and being creative using our artificial intelligence to say, hey, maybe we're not working 8-hour days. Maybe we're working sometimes 10-hour days, only 3 days a week. Maybe we're working 4-hour schedules. You have to get really creative in that world. That's a little bit about what I think I'm seeing today. And it's not going to get any better. We're going to have to find ways to engage people and make those jobs attractive and give them the tools that help make the job attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing too. I mean, I think where you look at the challenges around labor, it's like you said, the job in the warehouse is not necessarily the most attractive. And I think we've seen just kind of so many, I guess, at that level of that type of work, so many other options now for people to do that are more flexible, from a gig worker perspective and things of that nature. It's hard to, sell somebody on coming to move some boxes around all day long and do heavy lifting and repetitive movements and things like that when, they could maybe, be in their car driving people around through Uber or whatever the case may be instead. So I think it's certainly a challenge. And like you said, that challenge leads to an overall kind of ripple effect throughout the entire operation where you're getting backed up on the inbound side and then you end up getting backed up on all the other processes too. So, I mean, around those labor challenges, I mean, how do you kind of look at your existing workforce that is in place, whether it's enough people to meet the capacity you need to meet, or it's not enough people? I mean, how do you get the most out of that workforce? And I guess, how do you kind of help in some ways with the software side from Inform?
Yeah, I think on the staff scheduling and what we would call the name of our solution is Workforce Plus. And we really look at, not only a day of, but we look at multiple days out. So we look at that technical planning. It could be 3 days out. It could be 1 week out. And there's so many different metrics that come into employee scheduling. There comes into consideration of, what do the employees need? So what do they need in their scheduling? What days do they need off? When do they need to leave early? There's the unforeseen, there's the sicknesses, there's the call outs, there's things of that nature. You also have labor agreements, depending on which customer it is. There could be a labor agreement you have to adhere to. You've got regulatory issues, overtime, required amount of downtime, depending on what kind of job it is. There might be a required number of downtime that you have to have in the position, especially in transportation. And so you've got all these scheduling conflicts. And what you ultimately have to do is quickly analyze all those different parameters. And then to make it even more complex, you're adding in, oh, by the way, is there a certain certification? Is there a certain requirement that this employee needs to do that particular job within the warehouse? Are they forklift certified? Are they certified to use a particular packing or loading type of piece of equipment? And these are something human intelligence planners that try to plan that labor, and constantly throughout the day or the week, they get all these different changes to the schedule. They can't keep up. Whereas when you get into an intelligent workforce planning solution, it's constantly looking at all those parameters, and in real time, it's shifting those capabilities. And sometimes it could be that you have a delay. Let's say, for example, you've got a delay maybe with a trailer coming into a dock door, and the normal stance would be, well, we just sit around and we wait until the trailer shows up. And in the meantime, we're not doing anything. If the system's looking at it saying, well, there's no trailer at the dock door, these people are all certified to do packing or outbound activities, let's immediately shift them to those outbound activities, have them working on that. The minute that we get notification that now the trailer's at the door and we can actually inbound the product and start stocking and putting things away, we reship. And in an environment where you don't have an ability or you don't have a solution that's helping the human intelligence manage those operations, I think you miss out. You get a lot of standing around. You also don't have any KPIs around your labor statistics. How long does it average to take for someone to put away a particular pallet of something? How long does it take them to, do a packing line operation? And if you're utilizing systems that track those jobs and help you track those jobs, one, you have better KPIs for expected, work performance, but you're also working with the employee. You're giving them, I think, a more satisfying job option. I mean, employees don't want to, in the days of, my days of running distribution centers many years ago, it was either Excel, it might have not even been Excel. We looked at Greenbar, we'd come in and flip Greenbar in the morning. And I think the younger generation, they want some form of technology. They want to be incorporated into the shift planning. They want to be considered, and they want to be invested into automation, AGVs. It's not taking their job away. If anything, I think it's augmenting and giving them a better job, a better, safer job. And I think these are just some of the factors that we've got to look at right now.
Yeah, very, very interesting points there. And I think it makes a lot of sense too. I mean, to your kind of one of your last points there about the younger generation and getting them involved with the technology. I mean, at this point, I think if we look at, I guess, like Gen Z and then the generation coming behind them, I mean, they've grown up digitally in a sense. I mean, there hasn't been a period in time where they didn't know what a smartphone was, right? Or a smartphone wasn't there. I mean, I know when I was a kid, like we still had, when I was very little, we still had the phone in a bag, right? My parents had in the car for emergency only, right? And now, I
didn't even have that, to be honest with you. I remember, I think I was my first job in my early 20s when I got that larger looking phone where you pulled the antenna out. You were so proud of yourself.
Yeah.
Live all.
So, yeah, I mean, certainly that generation coming in to the workforce is expecting that technology to be there. And I'm curious, you talked about the KPIs and the metrics within there. And in some cases, you said, they don't even have them to begin with. But I'm curious, as you start to engage with some customers and you start to put these solutions in place and you start to track these metrics and KPIs, I mean, what are some of the biggest kind of things that stand out to you that like operations are missing from like a workforce utilization perspective? Like, where is there real gaps that are noticeably happening on a frequent basis through this data?
Yeah, I think sometimes operations, they go into it thinking that, if I take an airport, for example, they think about it takes people so long to get to a gate, they have to move a wheelchair, they have to move a tug, whatever it might be. And sometimes you go into it and you plan your operation based on certain assumptions that the business has made on the timing, what it takes. And maybe when you set up an operation initially, maybe at the very beginning of the operation when it wasn't very busy, maybe the initial planning, those were accurate. But over time, based on volume, maybe now the distribution went from picking 10,000 lines a day, maybe it's now picking 50,000 lines a day. And those things very quickly evolve. And if you're not looking at those time studies and getting constant feedback, your old assumption that may not be that far back, maybe a year ago, now may not be accurate anymore. So it could be that maybe the employee that needed to go from point A to B within a distribution facility, it used to take them 15 minutes to get from point A to point B. Maybe it takes them 20 minutes to get from point A to point B now. So now that whole timing is off. And I think that those are some of the things, when you really do process mapping, business process mapping with a customer, and you look at their yard layout, you look at all the different complexities. Sometimes I think it's eye-opening for the customer that they walk through and think, wow, we did this study, we walked through it. And yeah, that employee's always been kind of telling us that, I can't get it done. It's just too far of a distance to go and get something, even in a forklift, and bring it back in time. And sometimes then that cripples another step in the operation. And once you do those process mapping steps and you get into the real operational detail, a lot of times it's eye-opening where they're like, okay, now we get it. Now we understand. And I think, that applies to any type of really critical time-sensitive operation, even like the container terminal world. When you've got vessel ship-to-shore operations going on, you're optimizing container movements, then you've got to get those to either rail or truck. You don't get them to rail or truck, the trucks can't get out. They can't get back in and do another turn that same day. Next thing you know, your backlog of containers, Long Beach, good example last year, they can't keep up. The next thing you know, you've got 100 vessels that are anchored off the shore. So it's just one of the real quick trigger points where it just slips and slips and slips, and nobody really knows maybe always what are the key drivers behind it. And next thing you know, you're in a scenario where, you've got 50 containers offsite down the street that you never planned for.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great point there about how your business starts to grow and you don't change your expectations in a sense from a productivity standpoint, like the case where you mentioned, before it's taking 5 minutes, now it's taking 20 minutes, and you never take the time to like break that down and see that. And I've certainly been in situations too in my career where, employees are saying, well, what is taking longer now? Because we added like another step or something, or we changed the layout a little bit. And, you're still saying like, oh, well, the goal is still this, the goal is still this, and you're not hitting the goal, right? And they're like, well, how can we hit the goal, right? And when you start to break it down and see those things, I mean, it can be eye-opening for sure to say like, oh, wow, we made this change, and it really is having like a huge impact over time. So I'm curious, I mean, how do you kind of look at that when you come into an operation? Because certainly there's a ton of data involved in, coming up with these solutions and being able to have this visibility and putting that data into a way that's visible and makes it usable. So what does kind of the setup and foundationally, you mentioned the process mapping in there. I mean, what does that process look like when you engage with the customer and are starting to bring in some of these solutions to help them tackle and see some of these problems that they're having?
Yeah, I think the first most important thing, and being a software solution provider, I tell people we are a software solution provider. We need to sell software, so we won't continue to be around. We've been around for 55 years, so we've done a pretty good job of doing what we want and what we're supposed to do. But we are very academic. We came out of the university, we came out of operations research. So what's at the core of everything that Inform does is how can we help businesses improve efficiency? And we typically see when we engage with a customer, it depends on where they're at in their journey prior to engaging with us. It could be that they've already gone through Kaizen, they've gone through a lot of efficiency improvements. It could be that they've not done any of that. So we might get someone that maybe is pretty streamlined, has done a great job, and maybe we still find 5 to 8% optimization efficiency results and savings in their operation. But if it's a company that maybe hasn't gone through any type of change management, workforce management type issues, or I should say issues, but if they haven't gone through the exercises of doing that, we could see as high as 35 to 40% efficiency improvements. So we're looking at distances, we're looking at mapping the process as far as how the day-to-day goes, but what are the key requirements that they have in their day-to-day operations? And I guess you can label them pain points. Where today is the business experiencing the biggest issue? Are they experiencing it in the dock door utilization, meaning the dock doors are jammed up all the time. Are they experiencing it pick pack? Are they experiencing it at the end of the line at nighttime, trying to get trucks loaded outbound? So really looking at what are the areas where they're having the biggest pain points. Don't just come in and try and sell a company a solution, because, and you also don't want to take a company's today operations and emulate those into a brand new AI-based solution. You really want to say, okay, we're going to change management. We have to let the system do what it's supposed to do. You need to educate the employees and you need to involve them in the process change. And then, because what you don't want to do is install brand new expensive technology and keep doing business the way you've been doing it for 30 years. So you need to have a true focus on what are the goals, what's the target? Is it to get to the cloud? Is it to get the infrastructure changed out? Do you have old legacy systems that needed to be ripped out because they can no longer be supported? We find this a lot in a lot of the industries that we play. And so you've got to have those end goals and strategy targets with the customer. And the first focus is listen and understand what are today's pain points and what's really causing their operation the biggest setbacks, and how can we quickly rectify those.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think breaking down all those different parts of the operation, really understanding like what's going on, and then how are we going to, I think, one, understanding, to your earlier points, how are we going to measure these in the first place, right? To understand what's really going on an ongoing basis, and then understanding what's been happening, and then start to make those improvements based on that, I think is a great way to go about it, and a great approach to do that. And then putting the software in place that's going to help you to do that makes a ton of sense. So very interesting insights here, and very interesting to look at some of these challenges and how you guys are helping to address some of those challenges right now. But as we look at towards the future, and we look towards the workforce in general and how that's being utilized, and some of these labor challenges too that we've talked about, how do you see the workforce utilization kind of evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one thing that's interesting is what motivates the workforce today, the age of the workforce today. It's very different than when I was in distribution center work 15, 20, 30 years ago, the prior generation. Everybody today is motivated different. So I think what we have to determine is, as you mentioned already once before, the generation that I would put that's currently doing a lot of these roles in distribution, warehouse activities, yards, they're younger, they expect technology, they like technology, they want to be more involved in the process, they like more flexibility in their shift planning. And it's the companies that give them the tools. Could be augmented reality for training. You're seeing visualization for safety, where they've got goggles that they can see the training guides that are directly in the visualization of the goggles, showing that here's the instructions how to do it. I think training's huge. The companies that do the best job in training, companies that do the best job in safety, and the companies that do the best in engaging their workforce and making it a better job. I don't think employees, you mentioned early in part of this podcast about, employees don't want to go to work and do a mundane task all day long. Nobody wants to do it.
Yeah.
But if artificial intelligence solutions can do digital decision making, then let's say make most of those 80% decisions that are very mundane. It's very easy for the system to say, yep, we're going to do this. We're going to do this again. And leave what I would call more of the exception based and the critical decisions that maybe occasionally you have to say, yeah, this doesn't fit in the realm. Let the employee make that decision. And so what we're doing is kind of elevating the employee and their decision-making ability, giving them digital decision-making support at their level of job. And on a management ability, we're giving them really the ability to see, the workforce, to see the operations, and all those little things that are snags throughout the day and throughout the week that before, if you don't have these types of technologies, you're just not going to see, and they're not going to be brought to your attention. And so I think all those different feedback points, even machines, you're looking at robotics, you're looking at AGV vehicles, you're looking at autonomous vehicles now. We've had a lot of conversations with companies using autonomous shunting vehicles, autonomous tugs. And these vehicles, they can't do their job unless you have an intelligence system that tells them how to map their way through the facility, through the warehouse. And so there's all part of that in play. And some of the jobs that those autonomous vehicles are doing, are actually allowing people not to do those dangerous jobs. It's keeping them a little bit safer. And so if you've got the labor shortage, put the machine or put the robotic or put the technology in the area where you can then take the human to a more valuable place. And so I think that that's what you're going to see over the next few years. And again, from just being really eager and interested, the culture and the future of the workforce, they don't want to work in Excel-based spreadsheets all day long. They want some technology that's engaging and that's interesting and that gives them feedback that's real time. And so I think that's where we're seeing a huge amount of change right now.
Yeah. I think those are great points. And I think, if you boil it down, it's kind of like using the technology to make that employee's job that they want to do better, and then making the ones that they don't want to do automated in some way, or, altering them in a way that they're not doing those parts that are so, I guess, undesirable or not wanted. But I think either way, you need to embrace that technology to be able to help the workforce do more, and then also feel more comfortable within the workplace too. Because if we look at our personal lives, right? I mean, we're all kind of consumed by technology at this point, and that needs to translate into the workforce as well, to have those same type of user experiences and interfaces as well, to be comfortable working with that technology. So I think a really great points from you here, Justin, and very interesting and insightful conversation and topic here as well, and very interesting how you're looking at the approach and breaking down these different processes to see where there's opportunities to measure better and then take action based off those measurements through your software solution. So thank you for joining me today on the show. And if people are interested in learning more about Inform and what it is that you do, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way would be to go to our website, which is www.inform-software.com. And basically, you'll see all of our strategic solutions out there. You'll see workforce management, intelligent truck and time slot management. You'll see all the various verticals that we play in. And again, we're not what I would call a salesy company. So it's really about approach. And if somebody comes to us with an opportunity where we don't think it's the right fit, maybe the scalability of the operation, we could install a solution, but it's not going to provide the value, the ROI, and the true benefit. We might say, you know what, it makes sense to wait for 2 years until your volume increases and your complexity increases. So we're really wanting to partner with companies to help them in their growth and their journey as it relates to artificial intelligence and true process AI, around their day-to-day business activities. So.
All right, great. And good that you guys are focused on that and helping to, inform the customers about everything that's going on. I like the name there. So we will post all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So Justin, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.